Hey everyone, welcome to Admit One with gmoney. Please welcome today's guest, omgkirby.
What up, what up? How we doing?
Thank you for taking the time for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We collabed on the pop-up where you did the soundtrack for the pop-up that we did in Art Basel, Miami. And I had a couple of people asking me like where they could get the song and stuff like that. So
Oh, really?
I really
That's
liked
nice.
the beat too. So it was
Nice.
really, really cool. And I know that was kind of like, I wouldn't say that was last second, but it was like, it was spun up together like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You were really easy to work with. Like, you know, we were introduced, and you know, I think we had I think it was a 30-minute or 60-minute call to see how we vibed, and you know, I thought that was really cool. I had a great time with that, and
It was awesome. I mean, I'm always inspired by what
yeah.
you're doing and the clothing line and everything that you guys are building. So it was amazing to be a part of it, and it was fun. And we're fast.
Yeah,
you know? As people will see today, we're quick with the music. You know.
And I know we've had this discussion of making the intro song for Admit One.
Yeah. Let's get it.
Can we start making one right now? Like let's start figuring out how this gets done. Right? Let's see how the magic happens, because I've never produced a song before, so I'd love to kind of see what it's like behind the scenes.
Yeah, I need your live feedback as we're doing this.
So I think we have 5 minutes, right? Is that what
Yeah,
it is?
yeah,
Like a 5-minute counter? That's what Lisa's telling me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's sometimes like creating a time constraint just forces good creativity. I know when I was in school, procrastination led to good output for me. So
Same. All right, so
yeah.
we'll start with the 5-minute counter, starting and now.
All right, you
let me know what you need from me.
All right. You sent some crazy references. You sent Fleetwood Mac to Biggie to Diddy to Bad Bunny. So like I was like, I don't know. All right, maybe that's.
I was all over the place. Can I add one more reference right now or no?
Okay. Yeah, give me. Yeah, what's the other one?
So the opening credits to White Lotus season 2. I can't stop listening to that. I know this probably makes it even harder. Yeah. So I guess for those that are listening at home or watching at home, basically you asked me for some reference tracks, right, for inspiration, like a couple days ago. So I sent over Juicy by Biggie, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, Me Porto Bonito by Bad Bunny, Back That Ass Up by Juvenile, Ghosts and Stuff by Deadmau5, and All About the Benjamins by Diddy. And those were the reference. And then I just added White Lotus, the theme song. So but I'm definitely like all over the place with everything.
All right. I love it. Well, let me put some guitar. This little guitar sample here. Let me play this. All right. Are you liking that? Can I chop that up?
Yeah, that was nice.
All right. Let me chop this up. I think we're a little more like hip hop and like upbeat with this, because like you sent like Biggie and like Juvenile and Diddy. Like I figured how to do that
really running the gamut, right?
Exactly. All right. Well, we're like a minute in, so I gotta go fast. So all right, let's. I'm gonna chop this little guitar loop up right now. Let's see if you like this. All right, you fuck with that?
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
All right. Let me lay some drums down. How are we feeling the vibe right now?
I like the vibe. The vibe's good.
Don't worry, I'll get some White Lotus thing in there. We'll find some. I'm gonna find like some weird trippy. All right. What do you think of this sound? This is kind of a weird trippy drum loop.
I like that.
This feels White Lotus, see?
Yeah, it does.
All right, let me add this. We're 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left? All right. More White Lotusy.
Yeah.
Add that bass line in. I feel we got some trippy White Lotus drums right now. Yeah. Got a little like old school hip hop, chopping up a guitar sample. This feels bright. You want to like keep people happy, keep people feel uplifted in this podcast. Yep. So, all right, let me add this bass. How much time we got?
We got 10 seconds left.
10 seconds? All right. Well, 5 minutes might have been ambitious. All right. Well,
well, let's go. Let's go over. I mean, we got time. The good thing about this is there's no hard stop on it. But
that's true. That's true.
I think that was a lot of good progress in 5 minutes.
All right. Let me just arrange this stuff really quick. Let me just I'll arrange it into a little like 8-bar, 16-bar loop. I mean, how long is the podcast intro usually?
It's only like 7 minutes. No, it's like 20 seconds.
It's like 20 seconds. Yeah. All right, let me arrange this in a 20-second loop. Well, hold on. I'm just I'm putting that together. What music did you grow up on? What was the main stuff you were always listening to?
I mean, it was like, so I'd say like a lot of Biggie, like East Coast hip hop, Diddy.
Yeah.
Like I think it really started Nirvana when I was like 12 or 13, like right before high school, and then in high school I got into like a lot of hip hop. That's like I think probably like my freshman, sophomore years when I really started going, and that was obviously like the rise of East Coast, West Coast hip hop and all that stuff. So, and growing up in New York, very heavily influenced obviously by East Coast.
Yeah, no, I mean I grew up on so much Biggie. I like I was always East Coast hip hop over like the West Coast stuff. I mean yeah.
And you grew up? Did you grow up on West Coast?
East Coast.
Oh, East Coast, yeah.
Yes, that's probably why. Obviously, what do you listen to these days? What's the number one track for you?
Honestly, I don't have that much time to listen to music. I listen I live in Puerto Rico, so I feel like I listen to a lot of reggaeton now, all the time, and salsa. Like so right now there's like this big festival called the Festival of San Sebastian, which is technically like the official end of the Christmas season in Puerto Rico. So, little known fact, if you live outside of Puerto Rico Christmas season like officially starts the day after Halloween, and it ends like on Sanse, which is like today or tomorrow. And so it's pretty much like 3.5 months. So this is like the final party where like the entire old city shuts down. Everybody's out there, like street festival and stuff. So like you go out there, there's like tons of salsa dancing, tons of like partying, bomba, like all this stuff. So it's pretty cool. But I'd say living in the Caribbean, I get a lot of Bad Bunny influence right now, reggaeton in general.
I was just in South America over the holidays, and 80% of the music they play is Bad Bunny. I love Bad Bunny. I'm a big Bad Bunny fan. But it's crazy, like he's taken over. Like any Latin music or reggaeton stuff, it's like they're not playing anybody else. It's just that new album. The entire album, they just like the club just plays it like literally top to bottom. It's crazy.
And everybody knows every lyric. It's crazy. Like the song comes out and everybody knows every lyric like 24 hours later. I'm like, how have you even had time to listen to all the songs?
Yeah, it's
great. I mean, the guy's he's crushing it. He's crushing it.
Oh yeah, no, he's insane. All right, I got a little. I'm just honestly because I've been talking to you. I don't even know what this is gonna sound like. Yeah. I'm just taking what we made and like just popping it up and building a little arrangement here. All right, but we got I think we got this is gonna be about 20 seconds. Let's see. Let's put it. We'll clean it up a little bit. We'll make it vibe a bit more.
Lisa, do you approve? Lisa approves.
Lisa says it's cool.
I think it's And Lisa, I see her back here. She keeps jamming her head, so it's good. I like it.
All right, we got the Lisa approval, then we're good.
Actually, we're gonna know if she likes it if it's on the intro to this podcast.
That's
or
exactly
the next
right.
one. We don't want to do it for this one. Yeah. If it's not on, you're just gonna know, like, fuck.
I'm like, yeah, Lisa wasn't vibing with it. I'll clean up and add some little White Lotusy shouts and scream things and like little like whistles, right, cool. and then yeah, we'll get it going. There we go. 5 minutes.
Dude, that was awesome, man.
Yeah, it was fun, man.
Dude, that was awesome. Now, when you make it, because here's the thing is, it's like every once in a while I'm like, yeah, like I want to like produce music and I want to be a DJ, and then I'm like, well, that's like so much fucking work. But I remember I took DJ classes like a couple years ago, and like DJ for me, like I think mixing two songs that like are already produced together, I didn't find that as compelling as like in Ableton, where you can like produce music like on the go. And I think that is like really cool when I see like people that are performing live that are literally like making the beats live for people to jam up to. Do you build on something like in Ableton, or are you building on something else?
It's all Ableton here. I'll show you. It's
all Ableton?
It's all Ableton here. There's a little
and do you use like the push? Do you use like the push thing, the push button? What am I? The push.
I have one of those. Usually it's a synthesizer and a keyboard. Yeah.
Okay.
But
because I bought an Ableton push, and like I've used it like once, but like I'm like, dude, one day I'm gonna figure out how to produce music live and then like go somewhere and spin on an Ableton, but like actually make music live, because like it is I just made it sound like it was really easy, but it's like so fucking hard to do that and actually make it sound good, right?
It's like it's like anything. It's like it feels like work until it's not, and then once it's not work, it's just like, oh, this is quick. It becomes almost like a new limb of what you're doing. You know, I think anyone like playing an instrument or playing a sport, right? It's just like it's challenging, and then you kind of like hit this threshold, and you're like, oh, okay, now I learned how to express myself, and that's what I was talking about earlier. I think kids' attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and with AI making things more easy and accessible. Like, I think it's going to make it so that if we can make the music creation process and everything more like intuitive, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, looking at like a piano or looking at like an Ableton DAW, because as you know, it actually is. It's really fun to mess around with it and do stuff, but it's also like hard to make good stuff. Then I think it'll be cool. It'll be cool for kids.
Next time,
imagine making music like playing a
I'm out in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, like next time I'm out in LA, I'm gonna swing by so I can learn some Ableton tricks. Because like ultimately, what I want to do is take like some like Fleetwood Mac songs and like make them like, you know, house songs, and like put them to beats that like I want, where like I would want to listen to this in the club, like, you know, when I'm out at 1 o'clock, and like a bunch of like oldies, like even like old school hip hop songs or whatever it is, right? And be like, how can I like mix these genres, or like, you know, even salsa or like whatever. So I definitely would love, next time I'm out there, I'll ping you, and if you wouldn't mind giving me some Ableton tips,
I got you, bro.
To learn a little bit, so maybe I can start making a little bit of music.
Let's do it, bro. Next time you're here, we'll make some Fleetwood Mac house tracks and mash up some Biggie over some White Lotus. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. That's what I'm here for.
I'm here for it too.
Dude, you know, I kind of want to talk about your transition from your tech background to your music career. How exactly did that happen? What was that process like?
The tech world was always an interesting way to kind of like, you know, it's always something that I've been interested in. It was sort of where my career started professionally, but my passion was always music. And so I think in life you got to kind of follow the passion. And I think also in the same way, tech was sort of my competitive advantage in a lot of ways, both from like a music creation standpoint, a marketing standpoint, a way to kind of like get into the industry, because a lot of people would want help in like understanding the tech world. And I'd be like, okay, I want to understand the music world as well too. So I kind of like used it almost as like a superpower, because I think that like being outside the box and thinking that way, both from a creative standpoint and what you're building and doing is always great, versus sort of like being in the industry or coming up in that industry. And I think that's sort of what's led omgkirby to be pretty disruptive in like the Web3 space and jumping full foot into it and thinking kind of, you know, strategically around how to like navigate and build in music in that space as well too, versus like, I think just only being in the music world, only coming up in the music world, you might kind of like think in that very sort of like linear sense. So, yeah, it's kind of a unique combination, but I think sort of it's what's led to omgkirby, which I think is a pretty unique combination of things.
Yeah, no, I think it's really funny because I feel like one of personally like my, let's say, competitive edges is the fact that I see the industry because I come from a different angle. I see the industry in a different angle, and it seems like
Yeah.
you do too, right? Because it's like super interesting when you get people from diverse backgrounds coming in with a fresh take on stuff.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. 100%. It's what creates new different stuff and allows people to kind of innovate. I think it's like when you are only like in one area and your experience is only in one area, you kind of like you're taught a framework and a way of thinking, and it can be challenging to kind of like get out of that. So I always look at life as like concentric circles, like experiences in different ways and like overlaps and concentric circles a bit. Like when you kind of like have enough concentric circles, like whatever all meets in the middle is going to be pretty interesting.
I was excited for this conversation because I think with your tech background and understanding like the generative art space, I'm super curious as to your take on AI
Yeah.
from an artist perspective because I know there's been a lot of debate on it. I know I like, and we'll get into like my opinions on it, but I kind of wanted to understand what. First off, like let's start with like, what is your overall view of AI and how you think it affects the creative industry like going forward? Because I mean, even just in probably like the last 6 months, maybe even less. Like I feel like AI came almost out of nowhere. Now I know that's not true because people have been working on AI for years at this point, maybe decades. But I feel like it's really starting to come onto the scene as a disruptive force now. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on it as a creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think like machine learning AI has been something that for like honestly like decades people have been working on, right? But it wasn't until probably like 3 months, 6 months ago, like you said, that they started building consumer products that kind of highlighted like the technology, right? Like a Chat GPT or a Dolly, or certain like photo editor apps and things like that that have led to kind of like a virality and a larger sort of understanding or awareness of it. But look, I think that there's a lot of people will go on ChatGPT and use these things and be like, okay, we're going to be rendered useless, like instantaneously, or like this thing can write a screenplay, and like why would we have writers for stuff? And I love the tech. I think it's incredible, and I think that like AI and its development and its integration into like literally everyone's day to day lives like is inevitable. I think from a creativity standpoint, we're still ways away from it actually like AI being able to like just make a hit song like on its own. I think people kind of sometimes forget and underestimate the magic of like the human brain. Like we barely understand it and how complex and challenging it is. And I think a lot of what distinguishes us as humans from machine is that creativity, is that sort of like emotional intelligence, is that awareness, understanding, and inspiration, and like, you know, just downloads of like inspiration that can happen at any moment. So I think that like we're just a long ways away from that happening, but I think that AI is 100% going to take over a lot of areas and things, and I think that it's going to be extremely disruptive to the music industry. I think that like it's going to be kind of like a dance of AI and human, and I think that AI will sort of break down further barriers of people having to have like musical knowledge and understanding to make music. Like already in the music industry, there's been so much of that, right? Like back when the Beatles were making music, like all those guys played instruments, right? They all went to like studios and recorded on like analog mixing boards, and they needed to like, they had drummers. That's where there's bands. Like the bands were like, it was a band because to make the music, you had to have the best people in the band with the instruments doing it. Like today, hit songs are being made in like kids' bedrooms because they're like downloading a loop on Splice and then putting some drums on like Fruity Loops and then like uploading it to YouTube, and then some other kids grabbing the YouTube beat and recording it on BandLab, and it's like a hit. You know, one of the biggest songs of the last year that came out was this kid who literally recorded on an iPhone on BandLab, and he got the beat off YouTube. And it's a song called like Romantic Homicide by this kid David. And so I think like for the past few years, you've just seen these barriers getting broken down further and further of the accessibility to creativity and the tools to make and build and you know, generate music. And I think AI is going to be extremely impactful in that world. Like if you talk, I'm sure there's massive hit producers with like huge platinum records out there that literally don't understand one aspect of music theory, or like don't even know what like, you know, a D sharp is. If you're like, you know, like, and I think that, that's cool. You know, I think that like the human brain should be like about creativity, inspiration, and the reality is like music theory and all these things are just kind of constructs. Like, and I think great stuff can be made from breaking outside of that. And so, I think that like I'm imagining a world in which like AI kind of continues to make that simpler and easier to just allow young people who are inspired trying to make music to be creative and help service the creativity.
Right, and like to your point, and there's a couple things that I want to go down on like what you just said, but like it's funny because like sometimes like I'll go to a party or like one of my friends is DJing and I'll be like, oh, like let me spin for like 15-20 minutes or whatever, and then like I go in, I just pick different tracks, and like then I just spin, and some people are like, oh my god, like you're like great, like you're a natural, like whatever, and I'm like, dude, like I just did beat match, you know what I mean? Like it's like
exactly.
It's just like so simple, right? Where it's
right.
like 20-30 years ago you actually had to like time the record, right? Like you actually had to like listen there, and like everything is just like so much easier now that it's like, okay, cool, I grew up playing an instrument, so I have like some understanding, even if I don't understand like the music theory per se, like I understand like a beat, right? And like what goes with what. And then like if I have like the tools at my disposal, is like it becomes super easy to mix two songs together and make it sound natural, right? And so to your point is like I do think that like that leads to more creativity, because then somebody like myself who's an amateur can then also maybe come up with something that like is really like goes really viral or something that people like, right? And when you open up all that access to people is like when you get like kind of like this explosion of creativity or the possibilities of it, because people that otherwise wouldn't be able to make music have the optionality to do that, right? And that's music, art, spreadsheets, code, like all these things, right? Like
exactly.
I've been fucking around with ChatGPT so much over the last like month and a half at this point, 2 months. And like I'm just like, oh man, like I can't wait till it gets access to the internet. I can't wait until I can like start using it in like my Telegram, so I can like start like communicating directly with it without having to go to the prompting the website. And I can't wait for like the next version of it that apparently is supposed to be like so much better than what we see out there already, which would blow my mind because I like it's already like so awesome and easy to work with already. So
exactly.
I think one of the things that I was actually having this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine, and one of the things that I think is really interesting is like when you talk about IP, right? And for instance, like once you have, let's say, I think it's like at least 10 like samples of whatever it is out in the real world, you can then like create something off of that using as like your baseline, right? So for instance, like if I drew like a painting in the style of Picasso, right? Like it would be like, let's say like a horse in the style of Picasso, and then like it would come out as that. Then the question becomes, whose IP is that, right? Because I think that those are like the questions that I think a lot of artists and a lot of creatives and a lot of lawyers are going to be trying to figure out over the next 5 to 10 years is like, okay, if you were the inspiration for that song, do you get royalties off of that because it was used off of that? Like, how do you track that? One, like, I want to know, like, I know this is like a super, super gray area, and I feel like this is something that, like, it's probably going to go to the Supreme Court at some point over the next decade. But I want to know what your thoughts on it as a creative, if, like, somebody would be like, oh, shit, like, I love OMG Kirby style. I want to make music in that style, but, like, not have it be, like, produced by OMG Kirby per se.
Look,
what are your thoughts on that if somebody were to do that?
I think my take is probably maybe slightly more controversial than I think other artists or musicians might think. But, I think even like our NFT project really highlights it. But I think music is a collaborative sport. I think for years and years, one thing inspires another thing. People sample, interpolate other things, like hit songs have had like multiple lifetimes. Like, whether it's like even like Jack Harlow's #1 song, that was his biggest track ever, was a new version of like a Fergie track, right? That was her biggest song, and it's like 10 years later. And I think that like a lot of great stuff comes from like sampling and changing things around. And obviously within those structures in the current music industry, like if you're sampling stuff, it's out there officially. People work out royalties, they work out splits, they work out that kind of like IP structure of stuff. But a lot of my favorite songs growing up were like bootleg remixes on YouTube or SoundCloud that I can't listen to because like it wasn't clearable, and things are really challenging to clear in the music industry because it's a very clunky and kind of like archaic structure. And so even with our like NFT projects and the drops of like allowing our fans and the collectors to own the IP and own the music that's being made and being encouraged to take it and like remix it and experiment with it and do things on top of it was like kind of the idea of being like, look, that's just the reality of the internet, right? Like if you're on like Instagram, you're watching like memes that are using clips from other movies, and like it's just sort of the reality of like the world we live in. It moves really fast. People like to like be a part of like culture and a zeitgeist and experiment with different mixes and mediums of like other things that are other people's IPs. And I think you have to kind of like allow for it and almost encourage it. And so that was like our NFT drop was that. It was like, cool, we're making generative music, generative art, like go do anything you want with it, go build on top of it, put it in your podcast, make your own like song off of this. And like we wanted people to have that ability. But I also understand that like, you know, there's people out there that are like, hey, I put a lot of like labor and time and effort into like something that now maybe other people are finding ways to monetize off of. So there definitely needs to be some type of like structure and balance to like protect artists and their kind of creatives to it. But especially with music, like music and excitement and monetizing music is so much more than just the music itself. It's building the artist brand, right? It's connecting with a fan base. It's getting the music out there in the right way and distributing it the right way. It's live performances. It's you know, finding stuff that kind of really cuts through, and like it's really challenging. Like 100,000 songs get uploaded to Spotify every single day, right? So it's like there's so much that kind of goes into it that if someone was using a chat GPT music prompt and was like, I want to beat like omgkirby, and then they did something on top of it and like made a hit song and it went #1, fucking awesome. That's great. Happy to have provided inspiration and been like a template for them to like do something. That's the idea even with the NFT. Like I want people to download or like own these NFTs and make hit songs on top of it. You know, we had big music artists like Jaden Smith, like buy them, collect them, and been like, oh, I'm remixing it for my own album. Like awesome. And like, we won't have any royalties. We won't have any ownership of whatever he makes and does with it. But like, that's cool. It's cool to like inspire, like art inspires other art. So that's a bit of like my take, but I do see, I think like, that's not kind of like my music take, but I think that it's different maybe across other industries, right? Like, I think that there's other aspects of things that can be kind of more complicated and challenging. But I think that there's going to have to be a world in which like artists or creators or people putting IP out there have the ability to at least like opt in or opt out, right? Like be like, I don't want my writing, or I don't want my music, or I don't want my art or my content to be just sort of like scraped and used into this machine learning algorithm. I'd like to like opt out of it.
So like, I guess my challenge on that is like, there is no opt out, right? Like, cause if I wanted to say like create, let's call it like a black hat, like machine learning algorithm, I could just like literally download like my favorite artists that had opted out, feed that into the algorithm, and then spit out, you know, stuff in their image. Yeah. So like it becomes really hard, right? Cause it's almost like because of technology, it's like you really can't, like it's tough, and it's going to be like, I really do think this type of some case like this is going to the Supreme Court very soon, because these are going to be issues that need to be resolved. Because like, even if like I'm an artist and I'm like, okay, well, Picasso was my inspiration, right? Like as a human, Picasso was my inspiration. Like, you know, what if Picasso didn't want like to be my inspiration, right? It's like, it's kind of like the same thing. It's really hard. It's super meta. I feel like every time I get into these conversations on AI, I'm like, my head starts to hurt. Like if I have the conversation too late in the day, I'm like, wow, like I need to take a nap before I start thinking about this. But I do think that like it brings up like a lot of interesting questions, right? Like, and to your point is like, even when you think about, I guess, like how most musicians monetize right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they do mostly by like everything except for like Spotify streams, right? Like Spotify streams, I feel like unless you're in the top like 1% of streamers, it generally doesn't pay very well. Like people make money off live performances and a bunch of other gigs, unless I'm mistaken.
I mean, I think it's different for every artist. I think there's artists out there that don't stream super well, but they are booked for live shows and do super well there. There's artists that have sort of like certain brand deals or, you know, merchandising that does well, or there's artists that can stream super well too. I think it's a little bit, look, I think when you think of like the scalability of music and you think of these huge crazy numbers and then what Spotify's paying, it feels really low. But at the same time, if you're streaming pretty well, like you can make pretty good money from it also. So I think it's a whole kind of package, and it's different for each artist.
Right.
On that end of things. But I agree with you on
have you,
like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You agree on what?
No, I was saying I agree on your take. That's like it's very complicated. Like there's levels to this thing on the IP aspect of like machine learning, right? Like you said, like we're already inspired. Like we'll be in the studio and I'll be like, let's make some drums that have like, you know, a Travis Scott kind of snare, right? But like Travis Scott doesn't own a piece of the song, but obviously like whilst we're making it, like everyone uses references. I can guarantee when you're creating your fashion line, like you had references, you know, like of course.
Yeah, that's the thing is everybody like it's funny, like to your point of you were saying like we're probably not going to have like AI generated music, like so, like it could that part could be taking longer, but like to your point is like you'll make something based off of a reference, and then you'll use that as a tool to then like make it exactly the way you like it. But it's like it just saves you time, right? And like
totally.
I think you see that on the creative. I've seen that with AI already on like not only the creative side where like I'm able to mood board like a lot of the things. Like for instance, like I mood boarded the pop up that I did in Miami. I mood boarded that with Midjourney, right? And I just kept on saying, okay, I like I did the prompt. And then I just like kept editing those prompts of like, oh, this. And then like, that's how I got to like my final product. And then obviously that wasn't good enough to, let's say, you know, need to be tweaked and have like that human intervention. But like it saved, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours at least from like, just like the mood boarding side. And in terms of like where it is that we want to take this. Right. And I think it's just like, if people see it as a tool and understand that like the faster and the more you can embrace this type of technology, the better off you'll be, right? And I use the example of like pretty much like 100 years ago, where I'm sure, you know, I think Henry Ford said this, where if you asked people what they wanted 100 years ago, they would have told you they wanted a faster horse, right? Like they wouldn't have told you they wanted a car, right?
Exactly.
And so then I'm sure when cars started rolling out, people like, but what about all the stable owners and all the haymakers and all this stuff? And meanwhile, like the automotive industry, you know, it's revolutionized, you know, everything, right? Like just like manufacturing in general. It's like, I think we're going to start seeing that like in terms of like productivity gains, not only in the arts and the creative side, but also on like, you know, the traditional side of like spreadsheets and, you know, running businesses and stuff like that. So I think it's really cool. I think we're all, at some point, we're all going to get, we're all going to be obsolete in terms of like a machine will be able to do anything that humans can do, but better. And we just have to embrace it. Like we can't sit there and be like, no, this is too good. We should stop it. And we just have to figure out how to harness it. Have you been using AI a lot or machine learning a lot in your creative process?
I mean, with, you know, I wouldn't say it's AI necessarily, was we were like the NFT drops, but sort of like in generative music and art, kind of like building an algorithm that can sort of feed and take inputs that we're creating and making to kind of then output art and music as kind of been like this song and dance of trying to understand and learn it. And I want to make it better and better. You know, with each of our drops, we've tried like challenging that, and I think it comes a bit more from like a production process that's really challenging and interesting. But I think in the future, like it'd be really cool. Like I want to be able to make it so it's like, instead of it being like a song and dance to create like generative art, instead it is AI that like is just, honestly, we're just feeding it sounds, and it's just taking those sounds and kind of like blending more creativity, the AI deciding like what sounds good where and trying to like piece and put things together, versus us being like, oh, it's sort of like more randomized or it's like generatively created. So it's something that like for the NFT drops and the music that's been created there, it's been us trying to like understand and learn it, and like, you know, like you said, embrace it and use it as a way to like try new forms of creativity in music. And I only want to go deeper in it, honestly. Like there's certain tools I want to develop for it. Like I think that as we're talking the stuff of like it being a tool and assistant, I want to build something that like allows, I think that like if you produce or make music, everything is almost like synthesizers now. If you're making music like on a computer, for the most part, you can kind of like make any sound like something using different sort of synths, but most synthesizers still require a lot of like inputs and stuff that like requires at least some type of technical ability to know what you're doing, or maybe you don't know what you're doing, you're kind of fucking and messing around with all them. Or a lot of people like download, like people that do know what they're doing, and they'll download that sample and allow them to be like, oh, it sounds like this synth or this sort of bass, but it's not the most intuitive process. And I think that like kids grow up playing video games, kids grow up like drawing and sketching in a color book, right? Kids grow up in a way of just sort of more like intuitive creativity, that how can we create like tools that are like more intuitive from like a musical creativity standpoint that I think probably requires like AI. Like even like imagine you're kind of writing and making a chord progression, and then AI is being suggesting like, oh, by the way, I think like based on these sounds and these inputs, I think this could sound really good next. Like, you know, based on understanding music theory that maybe this kid doesn't understand as much. Like try this, or like this sound is cool. Or you being like, I want a tinny snare that sounds like it's in a future song, and like the synth can kind of like try to make a version of that by being fed a prompt versus you like messing around with waveforms and EQ filters to like make that sound the best, you know? Then it's like, it's more just like, it's the coloring book. It's like being a kid and being like, what do I like? What do I want to hear? What do I want to draw? What do I want to put out there? And you're kind of like more intuitively creating stuff. So I think AI is going to like be extremely impactful there. And that's an area I want to further explore. And then I think with our NFTs and the Web3 music we've been making, going deeper into like AI assisting and supporting the creation and like the possibility of it, which is, you know, I think we've started there, but it's still pretty elementary, but I want to go much deeper.
Cool. And then is this all stuff that you want to do with omgkirby, like, and as like experimenting with the brand and the drops that you're putting out and all this stuff? Like what's next for you and what you're working on?
Yeah, I think next is just continue to like build and make great art and music. We have an EP coming out it's like more of a dance music EP. Kind of sound in like a little bit of the lane of like a lot of the music that we were like, you know, working with you on for the you know, for the Art Basel event and stuff like that. But it's all coming from us sampling ourselves. So the idea of our NFT projects, we're like, hey, you own this music, you own this IP, do anything you want with it. And we encourage it. We want people to like build derivative works from it. And then we were like, why don't we build our own derivative work from our own collection? So we have this like EP album coming called Collections that is our version of us sampling and us like kind of building a derivative work from the NFTs that we've made. It's really dope. I'll have to send it to you, and we're going to be rolling that out soon. Want to do more like generative music drops, but I think it's about kind of continue to further and push the boundaries on it. So the first one, the Genesis, was sort of like, hey, is this even possible, right? Can we make generative music that like sounds really fucking good and people like want to like listen to this and like it? And we did, you know, people would download them and upload them to Spotify, and they got like the biggest lo-fi beats playlist in the world. Like, you know, people like artists like Jaden Smith are like, these are dope, and are rapping over the beats. Like people built or use them into like their podcasts and like their video content. And that was like, okay, we can achieve that. The Channel Trace drop was like, what if we did this with another artist that's like super cultural and has a very distinct voice and distinct sound that we can like integrate into our universe, and with this artist be cool with like their fans also owning their sounds and their music and their own versions of it, and try something that's totally new. And that was the first time that had ever happened. That was kind of more groundbreaking from like a music industry standpoint. And like that drop wasn't conformed to like one BPM or one key. Like the music could kind of like, you could get one drum sound, but the drum sound could exist in like a lot of different kind of like formats and tempos and keys, which is really cool. Diversifying sort of like the mix of sounds and like what that collection sounds like. And so I think with the next one, it's just like, how do we go further, right? So like, is it going further on like a technological aspect of like the AI integration? Is it going further in terms of collaborating with an even bigger artist? Is it going further from ways that like people can, I don't know, work or like I don't know, just like consume the music? Like you know, we have different kind of ideas around that. So I think the next drop will be kind of another collaborative drop with a big artist, but I want to like even level up like the actual product and the music and the art and what you're kind of getting. And yeah.
What could you tease a little bit on what you're thinking about, like on different ways to consume the music? Yeah,
like we have like ideas of like different serums, and like I just want to go deeper into like the music itself being like I'm kind of imagining like you can kind of build other derivative drops that are interesting that integrate and morph the music that you're creating and doing. So imagine there being like a serum that's like it reverses and slows and reverbs and like flips out drums, and suddenly you can kind of like take other things that then are integrated into changing and morphing the actual like code and the music itself that you already own to now make new versions of it that are also kind of randomized in it. I don't know if that makes sense or not. And like, I'm still kind of like, it's all sort of being workshop, but the idea of like, I think it's like music before was like, you like a song, you listen to it, you like, cool, you'll go buy the vinyl of it. Then it was like, you like it, now you can have it on demand instantaneously and you like stream it on Spotify. You know, with like our NFT drops, like those have been like our albums, right? Like instead of doing a song or an album with Channel Trace, we were like, let's go build an input and create a lot of sounds and have those sounds be randomly generated and morphed into like these collections that then you own. And I want to keep going deeper into like just building new mediums and forms of like how you can like integrate or work or consume with music versus it just being like, hey, here's your song and listen to it. Like I have ideas around like how fans can engage. Like, is there ways for them to input their own things that then are like integrated into the generative music that they get? So I just think that like, I always say this all the time, the music industry is a pie, right? Like Drake competes with Beyonce competes with Taylor Swift, like who are also competing with like the 100,000 songs that are all coming out every single day. And we're all fighting for the same pie. It's all a consumption economy. It's all trying to like consume the same thing and like it's share of listenership, right? So the more someone's listening to one thing, they're listening to you less and you're making less money and you're getting less attention to it. And like, that's a really weird way to design an industry that's like built on art and creativity. And so I'm like, we have to build on top of the pie, not all fight for that same share. And like to build on top of it, it means creating new mediums, creating new art forms, creating new forms and styles of music or new forms of consumption or integration. And that's sort of like, that's been a big core pillar of the inspiration around like our Web3 music and what we're trying to build and create.
Right. Yeah. And I see a lot of similarities to the way I'm thinking about things too, because especially with the Art Basel pop-up that we did, one of the things that, you know, it's like people would walk in and they'd mint an NFT, right? And that was based off an algorithm. And they had like, outside of then like pressing the button, they had no input into like what gets generative, right? What gets generated from that generative algorithm. And like, I was like, what would be cool at some point is like, what if they like input something, right? Whether it's like a word or like an adjective or whatever it is, and how that then gets, then gets inserted into the algorithm so that each output is unique, where each person has their own input into that algorithm and makes it that much more unique rather than just like something that's random, right? And then that you get to feel that sense of ownership even more than you would have, where you see that people already have that sense of ownership of things that are generative because they're unique and they're one of ones. But like, how much more of a sentimental value and how much more of a connection is there if, you know, if like I input, you know, the word blue and you input the word red and we have different outputs, but they're each unique and our own and we like them, right? Like, I think that there's a lot to be said for that, right? I think that that's like kind of like the next evolution of all of this, right? Is like, okay, here we have these generative algorithms where each one is unique, but they're all similar. But now it's like, how do you start making them so they're unique, but you have input as the user, right? And it's like, maybe you don't have total creative input, but you have at least maybe one little tweak here and there to kind of make it a little bit more individualistic and a little bit more sentimental to you as the end user.
Totally. I think that's like, yeah, that's you create more of that emotional connection, right? And like, I think that's dope that you're thinking about it this way and doing kind of a similar thing. But I think like everyone's always listened to music and thought of like their own kind of idea or form of it, or been like, or had their favorite artist drop an album. They're like, oh, I wish it sounded a little bit more like this, or like whatever it is. And I think there's artists out there that take really interesting ways to get like fan feedback. And obviously even today with like TikTok, like artists tease songs before they drop them to kind of see like, oh, do my fans like this? Is this one doing well? Like kind of almost building an audience for the music before the music comes out and exists. But I think that if you can optimize towards like making things feel more special, more unique to the fan, to create that emotional connection, to give them more of that sense of ownership, like you said, or at least have their inputs more directly, inspire what the music is, you're going to just kind of create, I think, just more like interesting art, or give people like different optionality with it. It's why, like, for a while, and we'll go back to it, we're dropping a song like every week. We have hundreds of songs out there. When we're dropping the collections, we have thousands of songs, and it's like you go on OpenSea and click through and find the one that kind of connects. Like, I think the fun part about our drops were always like, yeah, there's rarity metrics with the songs, which is like fun, right? And kind of like gamifies the idea of like, oh, which ones, are you getting and not. But like when you were minting one, maybe you minted one, you're like, I kind of like what this sounds like, but I don't love this song. And you go and OpenSea, you're clicking around. Like, music is subjective, right? Like, just as like art and fashion and all these things kind of are. And I think like the fun part of it was like, it's more about finding the track or the music that like you connect with most emotionally. And there's kind of like almost these like endless randomized variations of that you can kind of like find and click through. Or maybe when you mint it, you get the perfect one. Or maybe because you minting it, right, and it was you doing it or the input that you gave, you're like, you love it, right? It is the perfect one for you because you're like, oh, this is the one that like the universe, or in this case, the algorithm serves to you.
Right. It's really it's funny you say that, because I've had these conversations a lot with regards to generative art from the visual side, where it's like, just because something's rare doesn't necessarily mean like you find it aesthetically pleasing, right? It's like, okay, it's rare, there's less instances of it, but like I think we're gonna start seeing, like, over the course of time, is like in some collections, what is the rarest might not always be what's worth the most, right? Because it might not be the most aesthetically pleasing thing to the human eye, right? And so it's like there could be something that is technically less rare, but people like more, that could appreciate more in value over the long term. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that play out, because like you said, it's like, it's very subjective, and what could be aesthetically pleasing now might not be aesthetically pleasing 100 years from now or 500 years from now, right? Because tastes change, and we all know that, right? Like, because humans always evolving in our thoughts and like the memes that surround society. Kirby, thank you for hopping on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Showing, giving us, your thoughts on AI and the creativity space, as I do think that that's like super, super important to keep in mind going forward. And then more importantly, like, producing this track, like literally in 5 minutes. So really super impressive. And you've been awesome to work with. So, I mean, I love like jamming with you every time we get a chance to talk.
No, man, I appreciate you having us on. Like, this is awesome. This is great. This has been it's been fun. I'll bounce to the track, make sure it gets Lisa's approval, send it over so you guys we can cue it up right now on the outro as well too, so people can vibe out to it. Give them a little bit. But yeah, no, this is great. G, I love it. We'll talk soon. Let's hang in LA. Let's make some music. Let's do a lot more stuff, man.
Awesome. Great.